Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and I have been waiting years to have today's guest on our show today. Introducing cult and child abduction whistleblower, devoted father and husband, published writer and author, podcaster and host of his own YouTube channel at I Love You Like One, child abuse advocate, independent researcher, avid reader, biker, gardener and farmer, animal caretaker, Dave Matthews Band concert goer, coffee lover, and a man on a mission to expose evil and get his daughter emancipated from a satanic cult, Iain Bryson. A little bit about Iain and the harrowing story we will be diving into today. In 2010, Iain's first wife and their daughter traveled from their home in the Netherlands to his in-laws' home in Poland for a visit on two different occasions. On both occasions, his first wife returned completely distraught, so different in nature that he questioned whether this might be her evil twin. On both occasions, their daughter returned with multiple signs and symptoms of having been abused. Then, in December 2010, after their second return to their home from Poland, his first wife told him that her family was a cult, that she was under mind control, that she had something like Stockholm syndrome, that her dad created a red herring so that nobody would believe Iain when he tried to get help, that she was taking their daughter back to the cult in Poland, and that Iain would never see his wife or daughter again. On December 27, 2010, Iain unknowingly said goodbye to them for the last time, giving his daughter a huge hug, thinking they were going to the library down the street. He has not seen his daughter since this moment. After realizing what was happening, Iain avidly tried to get help, but there was no acceptable response to his pleas. The Netherlands wouldn't even take a police report. The United States told him it was out of their jurisdiction, and Poland was out of the question. Iain filed an international parental child abduction report with the U.S. Secretary of State for his abducted child under the Hague Abduction Convention, and they told him it could take up to 2 years for any legal action to occur. Iain remembers thinking, this is not a missing car or stolen bicycle. This is my daughter. After 4 months, he decided that he had to demand an investigation by placing himself in the middle of it all. Iain drove to Poland and assaulted his father-in-law in the street, thinking that this would lead to a child abuse investigation of his daughter. He miscalculated. There was no child abuse investigation. What actually ended up happening was that Iain ended up spending 50 months locked up and in prison in Poland. He was released in June 2015, and ever since, he has been on an urgent quest to bring public awareness to this story in hopes that it'll lead to freedom, justice, and a heaven-sent reuniting for him and his daughter. Today, we get to hear their story. Iain's story touches on many things we hear on this podcast from an outsider's perspective. Like many parents who didn't grow up in a cult and who are now whistleblowing about their children being abducted into a cult on this podcast, Iain was unwittingly caught in a web of horror and deceit, and prior to the events that occurred starting in 2010, things like mind control, satanic ritual abuse, and cult abuse were completely foreign language to him. It is only in hindsight that a parent in these situations can look back and discover red flags and warning signs that were always there, and discover that hidden within these signs were things lurking in the darkness that are so horrific and evil that even the most avid imaginations couldn't have comprehended what was actually happening behind closed doors. Iain is a hero of a father, someone who has risked it all for a little innocent girl who has been taken captive by the same radical intelligent evil that survivors like Nathan Reynolds and others defected from and are now whistleblowing on podcasts like this one. Many of us who listen to these testimonies can't fathom these events happening so close to home. Yet Iain's story is a testament that these situations can happen to anyone and that these cult systems are often right in our very own communities and backyards. This podcast episode also comes with a call to action. I encourage you all to please help bring awareness to this case in any way that you can, whether through sharing this episode, purchasing Iain's new book, I Love You Like One, A Letter to My Daughter, Abducted by a Cult, and reading it yourself or gifting one to a friend, or contacting Iain or myself with any tips on people, places, or things that could help bring about justice to this heartbreaking situation. Iain may not have been believed by authorities, but we who are listening now know the truth and have the power to overcome the silence with our voices. Iain's daughter is so lucky to have a father who would go to such lengths to fight for her freedom, and the least we can do is jump on board and help in any way we can. These cult members always underestimate their victims, and they sure did underestimate Iain. There is no bond stronger than a parent and a child, and Iain's tenacity and strength to speak on behalf of his beautiful daughter, I know will no doubt lead to the happy ending we are and will be praying for. I ask you all to please put away whatever you're doing and give this devoted and brave father turned whistleblower your full attention, as he's literally risking his life to come forth and share such a difficult testimony on behalf of his beautiful, precious, and innocent daughter. Adele, this episode is for you. We see you, we hear you, and we will never stop fighting for you. Before I finish introducing today's guest, I wanted to give you guys just a couple quick reminders and updates. If you'd like to be on the show or share any information privately with me, you can send me an email at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com. Or I have a new email, standbysurvivors@protonmail.com, if you guys prefer a more secure website. I've also partnered with a couple of my favorite brands to get you guys discount codes on some of my favorite products, including Rife Technology frequency machines and blockers and CZTL's high quality methylene blue. You guys can treat yourself to holistic health at better prices with brands you can trust. All those links are in the show notes, you guys, and I'd love your support across all platforms. Thank you all for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor, whistleblower, advocate, and educator disclosures. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, anti-child abuse and survivor advocate, man of God, content creator, exposer of evil, voice for the voiceless, walking miracle, and a loving father with a hero's heart and spirit, the one, the only, Iain Bryson. Iain, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Wow, Emma, thank you. I'm just overjoyed to be here talking with you. Thank you for the introduction.
You're welcome. These stories are always so hard for me. I always feel like more wimpy than the parent telling the story a lot of times. I mean,
What's new for you?
What you're doing is so difficult. It's like you have your own weight on your shoulders with what you've been traumatized with, and you have another story of somebody's voice who doesn't really have the capability of coming on a podcast and having a voice and maybe not even being aware of what's actually happening, and it's so important that more parents get out and speak, because almost every single parent I know that has gone through something like this thought at the time that like they were the only one in the world that this was happening to, and nothing could be further than the truth. Like, it's terrifying how prevalent this is, and there's, like I said, there's no bond greater than a parent's love. And it's like, you try to think about how could a parent do anything but protect their kids, and you realize there's literal monsters out there who could care less, and are anything but protective. So it's really an honor to have you on and to finally get to share this story. I think what you're doing coming forward, and I want to talk about your whistleblowing journey later on, is just so brave, but I know that your life was a lot different before now, and even before you were a father and a husband to your first wife. So I thought we'd give an opportunity to introduce you to the audience. People listening, if you guys are on YouTube, you may have seen Iain in some of our book club Zoom calls or in the chats. He's an avid member of the community, even if you guys haven't heard his personal story. So I'm really grateful to have him on here so you guys can actually meet him and support him. But let's introduce the audience who doesn't know you to who you are and talk about anything significant in your childhood or adulthood that would be important for people to know.
All right. Thank you, Emma. So I was born in Eugene, Oregon in 1977, and my childhood was good, I think. Like I thought that life was pretty simple and good for most kids. I was bought, it was a Christian home, but it wasn't a home that talked about evil or we didn't even really pray together. So it was kind of like, not what I know as important to for Christians now, but I had the basis, had the foundation, and then I was baptized in eighth grade, and I had an experience with the Holy Spirit, and then, from eighth grade on, I went from that to being an agnostic atheist again for a long time. But I had the foundation. Was made to memorize scripture. I was just like I played sports. I wasn't really interested in the sports. I liked competition, but I knew that, like school was what I was good at. And so my mom said, do your best. So I tried to, and I enjoyed school. I showed horses for a while and got really good at that. And we had a farm, and it was, just school and kicking around the farm were the things that I was doing. One of the main things I was sexually abused by a 12-year-old neighbor named Jennifer, and I was 7. So I had that experience. I broke my collarbone running from her. I couldn't communicate to my mom about this. Like I tried to. I remember trying to. I colored on her home to try to get attention, and this went on for a little while. And like I didn't remember that until I was in my early 30s when stuff started coming up with my own daughter. So just like that experience taught me the power of amnesia was something even so simple as a 12-year-old girl and a 7-year-old boy. And so that it was a very valuable experience for me to because the fact that I didn't know even have any inclination that this happened to me until I was in my 30s. Um, and I also remember my parents spanking, and I had an innate knowledge that there was something wrong with that, and just telling my dad, "I'm going to do something to change this," and meaning it, like at the time in my child voice, and like I wasn't just saying it because I didn't like the pain. I knew there was something wrong with that. Um, so I went to UConn after I graduated high school, and I didn't really know what I was going to do, and what I was going to do. I knew I wanted to help people, so I was pre-med, and then I found out I really don't like chemistry labs and things like that, and math. So I just started taking classes that I enjoyed, mostly in like sociology and psychology, learning about social problems and how the world works and people, um, and then I still didn't know after I got my bachelor's what I was going to do, because I was offered a job as a probation officer, and I basically I didn't want a job where I just go clock in and kind of you can help people in that environment, but I just didn't feel like that was the way for me to go. So I continued on to grad school and got my master's in political science, constitutional rights and liberties, marginalized people, and just still thinking I'm going to do something with that and maybe go to law school. And then a professor told me, like he had been a lawyer, he presented before the Supreme Court, and it's just all about the money. And they're like, it's not what I think it is. And so, it's not that I was against money, but I didn't want to go to a job where I bill hours and kind of pretend. So I didn't end up going to law school. I thought about it several more times, but then I met my first wife in 2004, which was a year after I graduated with my master's, and did some traveling in Australia, and just like came back from that and was just like playing Grand Theft Auto on PlayStation and hanging out with my brother, who lived next door, and he was a drug dealer. And just like there was always something going on, and I had my own apartment, so I was able to read and just relax and kind of um, not have to do anything after going to school for a while. And then my friend called me up and said, "You got to come over. There's some Polish people here," and I did.
And then was that where you met your wife? Was there your first wife?
That was where I met my wife. I drove right over. Um, And my friend who had called me was standing outside with three Polish people, two women and one guy. And I just got out of the car, and pretty much when I locked eyes with my first wife, I was hers. Like I knew that she was going to be my wife, and it went from there. The guy that was there was supposedly her boyfriend, but it's just the way that she transitioned from him to me was smooth. So I'm not sure that he was her boyfriend, but that was the story given to me. And I had all three of them move into the same apartment building I was in, because it was my dad's apartment building, but not in a nice part of town. You know, like I would have people knock on my window for crack money when I pulled in sometimes. So, but still, my brother and I had the whole apartment building to ourselves. So the three Polish people moved in, and then not long after, I told my first wife, all right, like now we're together. She like took a plastic ring off her finger and said, "Give it back to me and ask me to marry. Ask me to marry you." So I did. Um, I was just like so sold on the fact that she was going to be my wife, and just went with it. As soon as I made that decision, there was no turning back.
And so before meeting her, had you ever had any type of exposure to human trafficking or any type of extreme abuse? Was that anything that you had ever come in contact with?
It was not anything I came in contact with, like in reality, and even through college and grad school, no one was talking about this, you know. And I took like higher level social problems courses, and it's just not even on their radar. You know, talk a lot about poverty, but child abuse and human trafficking, I had never heard of them except maybe like from a distance, you know, like the milk carton type stuff. You know, like it wasn't real in my life. Um, yeah, the worst I had seen was spanking, and I had heard about alcoholics who were bad, and other than that, it would have just been TV.
When I had interviewed a woman named Asia Rain, a Mormon church survivor, she had said something about what you just said. And she's like, when we do hear about these things like human trafficking or anything else, satanic ritual abuse, we kind of compartmentalize it and want to believe it's like far away from us. Like that happens in the hood, or that happens in like weird little towns that are off grid, or,
Hmm.
you know, it doesn't happen anywhere around me. Like that doesn't exist. So I don't have to look. I can like keep my blinders down kind of, you know, because it's separate from me. And we don't realize like how often we come in contact with cults, survivors, perpetrators,
Hmm.
you know, whether we're watching TV, listening on the radio, or like walking in the grocery store, or, you know, doing whatever it is that we do day to day. You know, it makes you question everything whenever you learn this, but it's not something that if you haven't dove into it, it seems so far from where you could be, you know, and I think it's always just so incredible that these things happen to so many parents, to where
Hmm.
this deception is so on such deep levels because of the mind control and because of how hidden all of this is, that something can happen like what happened to you, and it's not something that you can see until after it happened, you know, and it's like, holy crap, like how did this just happen, you know, like
Hmm.
everything, like where, you know, I didn't see any signs. And you know, and of course you can reverse engineer and be like, well, wait, this was kind of weird and this was kind of weird, you know, but I just think it's so wild, like how we do look at the milk cartons and we're like, like I'm just gonna throw this away. Like that's probably somewhere else, you know, it's not here. I don't have to worry about it, you know? And
Hmm.
so I totally get that, you know? And so when you met your first wife, what was it that kind of swept you and her off each other's feet so much? And what did you notice about her then? Was there anything that you can look at now and be like, oh, that was kind of a warning sign? Or did she sort of hide that mind control and compartmentalize it and present to you as a different person?
I think both. Like I think there was like a just a block in my head where, even though there were signs from day one, I I couldn't believe it until it was like actually right in front of my face, just because my brain was protecting me from that. And I also think that God put us together probably too, and that this is the journey I'm supposed to be on. You know, even though God doesn't want bad things for us, but just the way that my life was taking me, I think that I fell for her for the right reasons. And like right away, I knew something was wrong. Like she was a unique person in many ways to anyone I had ever met. Um, and her photographic memory of just black and white shifts in thinking one thing this minute and the next thing the next minute. The things that she told me, she would tell me that she do, doesn't have a relationship with her father. The nicest thing that he ever did for her was bring her one cup of tea. And so we went through like this lying thing where she would tell me statements like that, and then I would accuse her of lying because I didn't understand what was going on. And just like a statement like that, I'd be, well, let's break it down. The nicest thing that your dad ever did for you could not have been to bring you one cup of tea. Like, why do you lie? And eventually I figured out that she's not really lying. Like that's what she's supposed to believe and what she's supposed to tell people. Um, but the DID was just something I had never heard of, and I wrote in my journal weeks after meeting her that I thought she had a borderline personality disorder, um, possibly some kind of trauma disorder, possibly incest, and that was in the first few weeks of meeting her. And then I kept learning more. I went to Poland with her to so that we could get a fiance visa and return because at the time she was only over on a 3-month visa. So then I got to meet her family, and with her family, I knew her dad was an alcoholic. I knew that her mother was miserable, and it felt weird, but I could chalk it up to them being Polish, and then that was enough.
Interesting. When you were around the family, how was she? Did she seem more reserved when you guys were all together? Did you notice anything different about her when she was in that environment?
Yeah, a lot of things were different. Um, I started having severe panic attacks, and one of her mother has a doctor friend, and I think it's a cult doctor probably now, but I'm not sure. But he got me on 20 milligrams of clonazepam per day, which I had never heard of clonazepam, never tried it, and my anxiety was so strong that I was just popping 2 milligram clonazepams like Tic Tacs and drinking, some kind of alcohol over there because I felt like I was going to explode. My fiance at the time would tell me things like, when I'm in Poland, I'm not with you, I'm with my dad, and just take off. And then I couldn't speak any Polish, people around couldn't speak English, so I couldn't do anything without her, and just like went through a period of having panic attacks. And like we'd go visit her, my first wife's grandfather, and he would say like, how was she in bed? And like it was really strange. Um, and I just clung to my first wife more because of it, because I was just like, either we're good or this world here is crazy and I don't know what's going on. But it became like a trauma bond between us because she was also flipping, and she would, all of a sudden hate me, and I would just like, what do you mean? And we'd have to work through that, and it would take days or weeks sometimes, and then she'd flip back. But it was crazy making. Um, and I just chalked it up to them being Polish, and I was like, well, we're going to go back to the United States and live there, and then at least there'll be distance. And I hadn't thought of or come across, someone who had been child abused as a child, and then that carrying over into their adult lives, like that to me was a foreign concept.
As far as her family goes, what did, was there anything significant about her parents' jobs or their connections or grandparents? Is there anything significant that you can tell us about her family that sort of goes into a lot of the stuff that we hear about the networks and connections, from other survivors?
So her mother is a vice principal in a school, and we never really talked about that much, except that she could be making 3 times as much if she was 50 miles west into Germany. So like the poverty over there is obvious, and it's sad because I love Polish people, but they're in a different world, and the money they make is not worth anything, and a lot of them wish that they still lived in the times of communism because then at least they would all have jobs. That's another story. But so her dad had like he had keys to. We would go out. He would open different schools like on a Saturday or a Sunday, and he had access to these places. I knew that he worked for the city, but I never. It was always like while I was together with my family, it was always like he's having trouble. He's struggling with work, and he's not working. So my first wife would ask if we could send money to him, um, and I would like bring him pipe tobacco from the Netherlands, and buy him alcohol. Um, but it was like I knew his best friend was a judge, and just the way that people treated him when we walked into places was strange to me. Um, there's pictures of my first wife's grandfather in some kind of ceremony where he's in a uniform, and it's not a military uniform. I don't believe. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but he looks like he's the man there. Um, and just more recently, like I know that my father-in-law now his job is he has a big job in the city, and he's always on social media. And I have pictures of him with the president of the city. And so yeah, I didn't know all of this at one time. It's gradually increased to today, and I still find pictures every day of what's going on in that city.
Well, I think too, without the knowledge of all of the stuff existing and understanding connections and, the system, how it works and these networks,
Hmm.
how they all orchestrate together. I think even if you did know it, it might seem like she comes from sort of a heralded family or something that you'd be really proud
Hmm.
of. It wouldn't be something necessarily that would even raise a red flag. You'd be like, wow, like you come from a very accomplished family. People in the town, respect you guys a lot. Look at, the resume of your grandfather and your father. It's
Hmm.
interesting how we're sort of trained to do that too. And I think those labels and facades really keep us from really asking like who's underneath all those labels, like what's underneath pastor and president of this and director
Hmm.
of that and kids camp leader. Like if you take all those things away, like who's that person behind there? Like why am I just like blindly respecting them and like putting them on a pedestal? So it is
Hmm.
really interesting to see that similarity to how so many stories. Lisa Meister is a great example, a father being a pharmacist, a very respected pharmacist in the city, like these are people that walk amongst us and a lot of times that we admire in a way or don't think twice about. And that's such an important piece to the puzzle, I think, because I believe society really believes the opposite, that these people have to look homeless and they have to look like predators, and it's like, no, if you're a
Hmm.
predator, like just like how a lion can just leap out and get a prey, like they don't see it coming until it's right there. Evil doesn't come out in just plain light. Like it hides behind anything, any type of veil that it can, to be
Hmm.
disguised. And I
Sure
think
does.
that's really interesting that, she had a lot of that sort of connections. And I mean, was it the father that was best friends with the judge, you said?
Yeah.
I mean, come
And
on.
and he's also my wife's godfather, the judge is. So it's and it was weird. Like we would when we were walking around the city, she would like acknowledge different people and just call them cousins too. It just like that. It seemed weird to me. I'll ask her about it someday, hopefully. But I think that the cult is not just limited to my first wife's family. There's other people involved in the city, and I don't need to speculate about it. It's just someone. It needs to be someone's job to investigate and stop that from happening. But like I just couldn't see how another man like my father-in-law or his father-in-law could want anything besides what I wanted, which was, to figure out what good was and give that to my daughter. And like this, she's the most precious thing in the world, like the only place that I had found like real hope. But it was enough hope to she's my purpose. And that's all I wanted was what was good for her. And the idea that someone could want the opposite of that just wasn't possible because of how incredibly amazing a little child is. Like it literally didn't cross my mind, even with signs and some things as blatant as the nicest thing he ever did was bring me one cup of tea. It could not click. until it had to.
Did she ever disclose abuse of any kind besides these little sort of subtle hints that he, didn't do many nice things for her?
She never disclosed like abuse directly. She would tell me stories. Like she'd tell me stories like about how her mother's not happy because of her father, and then just like through her, she didn't have any memories of her childhood. So like I ascertained she had been abused because she had literally no memories except the ones that she would just repeat over and over again. And she did tell me that her dad cheated on her mom when she was a little girl, and then he brought her into it, and she had to tell off that woman, and he like took her for a walk and explained this to her. So, and later she denied that she had ever told me that, like in the weeks before the abduction. So I kind of think that like to the functionally what that lie or what that story did for me was convince me that okay, there's some abuse, maybe that's all there is, right? Because walking with a little girl and telling her about an affair that you had and getting her into that situation is child abuse. So it kind of just made me say, okay, there's abuse. Maybe it's just that, and I didn't have to go any further because she wouldn't even talk about that. Um, and I just believe that like if I just gave her space, loved her, that she would tell me what she needed to tell me, or that she would heal. And that obviously it's not happening anymore because now she's in her mid-20s or whatever it was. And um, so I kept seeing the signs and the cycles in my first wife, but didn't really put anything together more than that until my daughter um, was about 3 years old, and then she had things going on with her whenever she was in contact with these people in Poland.
I think that's interesting too, what you noted, just that, these things are there. But again, because the imagination of a normal person can't conceive that a parent could do something so heinous to a child, it's amazing like how many parents like you see these things and like that's not even on your radar that, you could have had a
Mm-hmm.
dad or a mom that was a pedophile or a satanic cult member or an MK Ultra programmer, and it's so eye-opening on the other side, because I always see that with guests where they're just like, how did I not know? Like it was right there. And it's like, well, how can you know whenever it's been hidden? Nobody would know until
Mm-hmm.
you actually have the vocabulary and you can conceive of these things happening and expand your imagination to allowing like these impossible things into our reality, and it's really interesting that she did exhibit signs, that now with everything we know, we could be like, okay, that's kind of a sign for something. But like in a moment, that's not something that, a normal person would ever think. It's really easy to like make excuses or even like make it about us. Like, well, I just have to do better, or we need to communicate more. I need to do more things for her. There's a lot of times too where like we take the blame sort of for the dysfunction, when
Mm-hmm.
just because there's no other explanation, like there's no other way to defy it, And so let's dive
Mm-hmm.
into how far into your marriage or relationship did you guys get pregnant? And let's talk about that, the birth of your daughter and how that impacted everything.
So we were married in July 2005 in the United States. So we came back to the United States and planned on living there. Um, our daughter was born in January 2007, so there was a little time in between, and her parents came over from Poland for the birth of their granddaughter, um, and that was interesting to have them in the United States at our house. And we were just living in New London, Connecticut, just kind of hunkered down. Like I still wanted to go back to law school, but uh, just the sudden and complete switches in my first wife were kind of debilitating me and making it so that I was either really felt really good or like I was just had my knees taken out and I wasn't able to do anything. So I was substitute teaching then as well as recently, and she was working for different jobs in a law firm and something else. And then I got a job at DCF as a child protection officer. Um, and that's what I was going to do right around the time that my daughter was born. I just had an interest in doing that. And I think my life was taking me towards helping children, and I didn't know it. But I trained for them and worked for them for 6 months. Like in the process, when my daughter was born, is when I was in training, and I had about 10 families on my caseload, and I was really disappointed with like what the priorities were in my job, and it was like my bosses cared more about the paperwork than about the children, and I couldn't fill that role where I'm just there to kind of, I would be able to help some children, but I didn't have the time to that I thought I needed to, and that wasn't the priority. They made it obvious that that wasn't the priority. It's the report and the state's liability, basically, when it comes down to it. Unless there's probably better supervisors than what I had. I would say there definitely are. But so, and just with what was going on at home, I stopped working there. And then my first wife convinced me to move from Connecticut to the Netherlands. This was 2008, so our daughter was around one. The euro was about twice the dollar. I thought because of my master's degree, I could work in one of the courts in The Hague. And she said she wanted to be closer to her family in Poland, that they could help us, and my family didn't have time to help us. Basically, I wanted to make her happy, and also thought moving to the Netherlands could be fun, and so we left.
Did
And yeah,
during her pregnancy or like right after the birth, around that time, did you notice any changes in her? Did that impact her to where you can be like, oh, that was kind of a trauma response, or this was kind of weird how she acted, or did she go through that process pretty good as far as with her health and mental well-being?
so she went through the pregnancy process pretty well. And then I think after the baby is when I started noticing that she didn't know whether she was connecting with our daughter, and that was I had a like a medical report where that was one of her concerns, and like she couldn't tell, and she would ask me, and I would have to kind of help her to what to do, I think, in some situations, and I ended up like being the one to potty train our daughter. But it was with her because she didn't talk a lot, and she would frequently just kind of like not be there, um, to the point where I would like want to knock on her head, or I even did, joking around sometimes, and just say, are you home? Where are you?" Like just staring. And so I didn't have any strong signs that anything was wrong, and I was happy with my wife and with my family, and I believed we could figure it out. And she was also amazing in a lot of ways. Like as a partner, when she was on my side, she was extremely strong and could just take control of situations and take control of people and change their minds. And like as someone standing next to me, I thought I was just blessed to have her. And you take the good with the bad. Everyone's weird in their own way. So like that was my wife, and I was gonna do it.
And so
I
what
just kept.
happened once you got to the Netherlands? What was life like, and how did that impact everything?
So it was a little bit harder than the United States, and I think I could live there, especially now because I know it way better. But moving over there as an immigrant, with a couple $1,000s in my pocket, and I got off the train and was dropped off at a hostel with no place to go, no job, and just met the people at the hostel. He ended up giving me another place to live, so I was kind of like moved in someone's house and paying that kind of rent. And then my wife got a job, and then I eventually got a job, but we didn't really know what we were going to do. And I think so, not knowing how things work, not understanding like where to go to talk to the government people you need to talk to, or get the home, get your living residence permit. My first wife figured out most of that stuff. And the only reason we could live there was because she's a European Union citizen. As an American, I couldn't just move over there and start working. So we had to go through all that. And I think I felt more like out of the loop. I didn't have anybody that I knew. Like the little contact I had with family before was just gone. And it was just me and my wife and our daughter. And so when it was good, it was exciting. And when it wasn't good, I felt kind of like a fish out of water.
I can only imagine, especially being in like a total, foreign place too. It's not like you can go to your friend's house or sort of like have the community support that you do in the United States that you were used to. If something went wrong at home, it's kind of like, oh crap, where do I go? Who do I talk to? So
Mhm.
that's a very interesting part of your story too. I think that, you moved to somewhere so far for the marriage and for your daughter too, because ultimately I feel like it was to help bring the family closer together and, like you said, help bring the daughter closer to the in-laws and things like that. And so did you guys have frequent visits with the in-laws and with her family? Did that become something that started happening more?
We did. Her dad and her sister on one or two occasions, her dad pretty frequently came to the Netherlands and just would live with us for a week. And then we would go to Poland a couple times a year at least, but quite often she would take our daughter over there just on a whim and just say, like I got to go to Poland, and they would run to Poland, and um, like things were weird with that because I was working for an online education company at the time, so I would go to work and I would buy I bought a bottle of Jim Beam for my father-in-law once, went to work and came back and it was empty. Told my wife, and the way that she told me, she was like, "Don't say anything to him, please." And I was just like, I can't, I just wanted to joke around, like, "Where's the Jim Beam? I've only been gone for 7 hours." But the fear that she had in that moment caught me by surprise, and just getting to spend more time with him, I think, like I didn't have any huge red flags. There were we bought him tennis tickets to go to the Amsterdam Arena once, and my wife started crying because her dad couldn't play tennis because he had hurt his elbow. So like that to me, like now I think it's part of Stockholm syndrome, like because she was legitimately crying because her dad couldn't play tennis. So I think living in that environment and having more contact with her family did teach me some things, but I still just thought he was a weird alcoholic, and that a lot of it was just the difference between my culture and Poland. And so I was, happy to learn, happy to still believe that nothing funny was going on in Poland. Even though like I would send my wife and daughter over on a bus from like Amsterdam to either Eastern Germany or Western Poland, and I would like joke that I'm going to like throw water on the back, kind of like as you do like a blessing when they're going into terrorist. And there were parts of me that like knew it wasn't good, and every time I went there to visit with them, it was still, when I'm here, I'm with my dad, I'm not with you. And I still felt terrible there, but I just kept going and just kind of suffered through the times when I would have to visit, and then just happy to be home. Now let's get back to our lives. Um, and my daughter once had to stay in Poland for over a month. And my first wife said she has scarlet fever. My parents say that she might die. And this was something that went back and forth. Like there's emails in my book about this communication with my wife. And like my point was, like, I can't see any doctor's paperwork. I don't have a say at all. You're saying your parents say, and I'm saying, as the dad, I want my daughter to either go to a doctor in the Netherlands or the US ideally. And I do have a say. And it was just this back and forth, and they didn't return until they wanted to. So it started just getting weird. And my daughter started coming back with signs that things weren't good over there. But I thought the least possible thing. It just, well, it's a different family. It's not going to be like in my house, and the damage isn't really that bad. And then she would be okay after a week or two back in my house. There was always like those time differences where it would be weird, and then things would get good, and I'd just be like, okay, now it's good. Let's think about the future.
What type of signs were you noticing with your daughter that stand out now?
So, so the last year that we were together, I was a stay-at-home dad, and I knew my daughter very well. So when I would send her back to Poland for a visit, it would be like a night and day change. She would come back speaking baby talk. um, going to the bathroom in her bed or in her pants again, even after she was potty trained. Um, so for this happened like after the past two returns from Poland, she would scream, "Not my pee pee, not my pee pee," right at shower time, and it was an absolute terror scream. It wasn't. It was obviously fear, but I trusted my first wife and just I started confronting her on it. But she would say it's a soap irritation, and she would rush her to the sink and rinse her, and she'd just say it's a soap irritation, it's a soap irritation. And so like after this happened multiple times, I told her, no, it's not a soap irritation. We need to go see a doctor, and then like why would they keep using the same soap? She wasn't over there for a day, right? Why does it happen after every return from Poland? What's going on? We need to go see a doctor. And my wife wouldn't look at me and would just tell me, no, it's a soap irritation. We're not going to the doctor. My daughter started talking about her grandfather's private parts, just bringing them up out of the blue. She came in once when I was peeing and said, "You look like Grandpa." She said the word "ya," which in Polish means egg, but I said, "What's she talking about?" And my first wife said, "That's what Grandpa calls testicles, or balls." She probably said, but like I just like, and these things would blow my mind. But I'm just like, they're in my home, so I think, all right, it's good for now. I'm going to figure it out. How can my first wife know these things and we've never spoken about it? Like, it's like a weird space to be in when the person that you rely on and trust 100% is the one who like should be telling you but isn't. And like, I couldn't figure out what was going on, and I didn't stop trusting my first wife until she took my daughter. um then my daughter was having nightmares. She would come in and say monster when we're sleeping, and I'd get up and say there is no monster. My first wife would say yes, there is. Um, just and yeah, just even something simple like I'd go in and turn the TV off when she's watching Dora, which was her favorite show, and she'd start crying. Um, and just eating, she wouldn't eat. My first wife would say she's not hungry, and it was just a weird environment in my home every time they returned from Poland. And it was my daughter with these symptoms, and my first wife not willing or able to talk to me, and also hating me. So I just felt like I had to pick up the pieces and figure this out and take care of my daughter in the meantime. And then every time after, I just forgot that there could be a problem in Poland, and my wife would start loving me and treating me well, and we would be dancing, and like, so my mind wants to think, well, that's in the past. That won't happen again. How could this woman how could that happen again? I couldn't wrap my head around it because I was fooled. I hadn't thought of that level of deception or that level of trauma.
Or evil, to think
Yeah.
like this old guy is, preying on your little daughter, whenever you're not around. And then also that your wife, like you're such a loving father, just wanted to protect your daughter and like we're living for her. And then to think that the mother could consciously or unconsciously know that this has happened and sort of be that buffer to cover for it.
Hmm.
Um, it's just beyond comprehension, like nobody
Yep.
can blame you for not knowing that or for seeing it. I feel like even most of us, if we were to be in a position like that, like it would be so weird for all of us. And it's so easy when it's not something that you can see happen in front of you. It's really easy to make excuses for it somehow, or to like chalk it up to something, or to again blame yourself. With Samantha, I know she too was kind of like, this is just a phase, once my kids sort of get used to these things and, they'll grow out of it. I think
Hmm.
that's the thing too, to know like what's a normal thing for a child to do, like complain about certain things, maybe not eat for a day, to have nightmares. Like a lot of kids do those things, and to know
Hmm.
like where that line is of like, this is the healthy way that a nightmare can happen, to where it's not based off true events, or it doesn't involve screaming, or things like that, or like wetting the bed. Like what's a healthy thing for a child to do versus something that is alarming. Like those lines are really fine too sometimes, and like those abusers know that. They know like where to tiptoe,
Hmm.
So it's enough to make you maybe, raise your eyebrow or squint your eyes a little bit and be like, what's going on? But it's not telling enough to like put a piece together of like, oh, this is like sexual abuse or this is, this or
Hmm.
that, and so it's I think that this is really helpful and I appreciate you sharing that because that's something I think too a lot of parents until after the fact don't see those signs, and I
Yeah.
really try to help people prevent these things from happening by sort of understanding the stuff that we're not taught. It's really sad that like in all the parenting stuff, that's out there, parenting books, parenting shows, like there's so very little about abuse and being able to recognize it. And it's crazy even for ourselves. Like we can be in abusive situations and like have no idea, just like what you were with your wife, you had no
Hmm.
idea like what was going on behind the scenes. So it's really interesting that you were kind of like on the outside of all of this, peering in and seeing these glimpses, but not having the veil lifted enough to where you could really see the big picture. And so
Hmm.
I wanted to ask you, I don't know if you know this, but how I feel like a lot of these parenting situations, Samantha is the same. Like her husband married her. She wasn't in a cult, same thing with you. Like you didn't grow up in that. Do you have any idea why she chose you? What was it about you that or maybe you don't know, but was there anything that you could think of like why did she choose me for this when she could have like kept it in the family like they do or things like that?
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I again, that's something else I like want to know, whether it's in heaven or when she tells me. But I've lived it, so I have like there. I've of course thought about it and broke it down into like what I think the possibilities are. And I think I don't think it was random. I don't. I think it was either she chose me or she was told to choose me. And so from there, I get I maybe she knew, like she looked at me, and because of she's who she is, a lot of it because of trauma, that she could see that I was somebody who would never give up on her. Maybe there's that, or maybe it's just something even more nefarious that I don't even like to speculate so much about. But this world is crazy, and it's like since prison. So my daughter was abducted late 2010. I went to prison after that, and then I got out, and that's when I found out that both sides of my family are Freemasons. And I didn't know that my whole life. And so like things like that are like, wait a minute. So my paternal grandfather was a 32nd degree Mason, head of the lodge in Connecticut, in a like what the heck's going on with that? You know, um, so I really the Lord hasn't opened my eyes to all the details, but I don't believe it was random, and I don't know. Like I do believe that my first wife wants out. I think that she set me up and told me things, and even did like gave me had my daughter bring and put a Bible in my hands a couple days before the abduction. She told me things that like she isn't like 100% part of it. She is a mind controlled slave, but they can't get all of her, and so her desire, I think, to get out and to get her daughter out, you know, she made me stronger in our relationship. Um, Very tough lessons, but she could have made me commit suicide. She could have made me do anything. She made me stronger, and she told me it was going to happen. She gave me specific information that you know I if she had told me what was going on, I don't think I would have been able to handle it. I think that this is the way that kind of had to go because of how crazy it is. But also, she didn't have any choice. She's playing a role and under control where she can tell me 3 weeks before it happens that I'm taking our daughter back to a cult because of mind control, and then it happens. Our daughter can be being sexually abused, and my wife knows about it, and she can't even discuss it with me for a second. Um, so yeah, I lost
I
you.
was muted. So let's talk about leading up to the abduction, and sort of like how things started to transition because she did start giving you verbiage and, making these disclaimers and sharing sort of what was coming up.
Hmm.
Talk about the transition of kind of that normalcy-ish, of her being, appearing more normal and like not involved with this stuff to when did she start saying these things and how did that start coming up in conversations?
So after the bad episode in Easter 2010, then we went through a period of her hating me and us getting to the top of that. And I thought we were done with that. A counselor together, she started seeing someone on her own. We both thought it still looked like borderline personality disorder because I couldn't even find anything, more serious than that on my Google searches at the time. But that was enough. Like, we need help. Obviously, we need help. So she started doing that, and our family was just super healthy after that. We just got to the point where we were dancing together every day, cooking, going on walks. My daughter was just healthy and everything was great. And then in August 2010, basically the two of us together decided we were going to move back to the United States. Um, I wanted to because I wanted people around me that I could, go to, and I also wanted to be in a system that I understood how it worked. But so we filed her visa because she couldn't just return to the United States, even though we were married. Um, because it's different now with Poland, but at the time she couldn't return even though we were married. And we decided that I would go back to the U.S. and look for a house and for work, and that she would go back to Poland for support again. And like she begged me not to leave. The last couple of days, begged me not to leave. Told me that she was afraid we would never get what we had back. I have a cousin that works for the FBI, and she begged me to ask him to expedite her visa. And I just thought she was being ridiculous. I thought that her fear of abandonment, which I had seen, uh, was just popping up again. And, so I just tried to reassure her, I love you. I'm never going to leave you. We have to do this because we're moving to another country again. And I'll talk to you every day and I'll see you soon. So I went back to the US and sent them to Poland and communicated with her every day. And all of that communication's in my book too, but it's all her just saying, "You're my world. I love you. I can't wait till our family's back together." Every single day for 3 months. Uh, and like, I just felt like the luckiest man in the world. And I had no inclination in my day to day that anything was going on. There were a couple times where I saw her on a Skype chat, and I could tell something was off, and I considered calling off the trip and just meeting back at our apartment in the Netherlands, but I still couldn't draw the connection. And it was just like, well, whatever it is, we'll be back soon together. And, of course, she's not as strong without me as she is with me, and we'll fix that. And so I didn't call it off. I went for those 3 months, and we met back at our apartment in December, early December. And I wrote her a love letter on the train home. I danced on the way home with one earbud in, just like the happiest guy in the world, returning to my girls after 3 months, which was just ridiculous. And the second I saw them, I knew something was wrong. Like the feeling I got, their tired demeanor was off. The way that my wife was holding our daughter, they didn't look good. So we went upstairs into our apartment. I set my daughter in front of the TV so I could go talk to my wife, because my daughter wasn't even really interested that I was home. She was just in a fog daze. I went in and tried to kiss my wife and wrap my arm around her, and she jumped away and said, "You're hurting me. I hate you, and I've always hated you." And then it just went from there. I pressed her on that. What do you mean? For the past 3 months, and you've said I love you, and like, I've seen this before. What's going on? We need to get help. And she just kept doubling down. And, "No, I hate you. I've always hated you. I'm taking our daughter back to Poland for Christmas or New Year's." And she didn't say these things sequentially, but over the course of this conversation, or the next few, she said her family's a cult. She's taking her daughter because of mind control. She has something like Stockholm syndrome. And then her dad had created a red herring so no one would believe me. And I just kept saying, like, "I've seen this before. We know you were getting help for what we thought was trauma. We need to continue that. Let's go get help together." And she was unavailable, and she got nastier with me as time went on. and just kept telling me, no, my dad's created a red herring. No one's going to believe you. And like I was having panic attacks again, just like uncontrollable diarrhea in our bed, sweating in our bed to where we'd have to get up and change the sheets. And I used that. I thought it was kind of funny because I would just say, look at look, Agata, look how scared I am of you and what's going on. Can we please go get help for our daughter? And try to talk to her logically, like, this is for our daughter. We know there was a problem. So therefore, we don't really know if that's a little problem or it could be everything, but let's go get help. Just totally unavailable. I wasn't, I couldn't touch her without her like screaming out in pain. Um, and she was in another world. She was in another world for the next 3 weeks. I tried to get help. I went to a psychologist, had him trying to contact her. I was emailing people and saying I'm terrified. She says she's taking our daughter back to Poland. Um, and I took care of our daughter during the day, and then in the evening I tried to convince her with whatever means I could at the time, including writing her like big letters and let's go get help. And I couldn't make contact with her. Um, I thought she was possessed at the time. Like even our cat was like going to the bathroom like on her pillow, and our cat was acting funny. And like I called her in and told her I wouldn't be surprised if her head spun around. Like I showed her a picture of Henry Rollins and her in Liar, that video, and said, "This is what you look like." But I was so removed at the time from believing in God. Like I had just I completely turned my back on that there could be anything worthwhile there, and just thought I had it all under control, that I was pretty smart, and together my wife and I could be successful in this world. And so I prayed over her and like kind of like half serious, half jokingly, like cast out demons, because like I was trying to just say, like, wife, this is how serious this is. Like I'm actually praying. I haven't prayed in my entire adult life. And she just looked at me funny and gave me she would not communicate with me at all.
When she was saying things like mind control, cult, like what was going through your mind? Did you consider any of that? Or be like, what is mind control? Or like, where could a cult be? Or was it just, again, like so far removed that you were just like, this is insane. Why are you saying this?
Yeah, I shut it down. I called her crazy. I asked, like if she wanted to be put in like a white suit or whatever, whatever they put in people in the crazy wars on TV. Like not because that's what I wanted, but because I was just trying to show her where we were at. And I was talking to a psychologist, and I wish he would have put her away involuntarily. Like that's not what I wanted for my wife, but I was terrified. Like she had our daughter's passport and was telling me she's leaving the country with our daughter, and would not tell me where that passport was. And I just like I rarely left the house by myself because I didn't know if they'd be there when I got back. And I didn't know what to think. I cult mind control. When I heard that, I'm just like, nonsense. Let's get help. Like it was too far for me to even go there. It's just like, yeah, whatever. That's not true, but we do need help. And I didn't think about it any longer until like what she was telling me when it came to pass. Then it started to like click, like, oh my goodness, this is serious.
And what about your daughter? How is your daughter reacting to that? Because not only like is she dealing with the trauma from abuse internally, but now sort of at home it's different too, with your interactions being different with your wife and your wife acting so sort of unhinged in comparison to what she was.
Yeah, so like I spent most of the time with my daughter because my wife was either in bed with a migraine or just sitting and like huddled up listening to music, smoking cigarettes. So, but I was blessed to get to spend this time with my daughter. It was the last 3 weeks we were together. And like so her signs of abuse cleared up. Like she was in a fog. She she was hard, like I couldn't really touch base with her at first. And like I had been teaching her the alphabet in addition to subtraction, just simple things, and she couldn't remember these things. She told me that she helps mommy when she's sick, uh, and like just weird things like that. And and what she really wanted was for mommy and daddy to be okay, right? And I just kept, I tried to like, just trust that it was going to flip again, like I'd seen it flip in the past, and just spend the time with my daughter and try to get in touch with my wife later when my daughter's in bed. But my daughter was definitely she she, she was affected in big ways, and telling me things like she didn't want to go back to Poland, that she didn't. The last day she told me she didn't want to be with her mommy, um, and I like telling me that I'm her best friend, things like that. And the rest of the time we were just playing, and she was a month from 4 years old at the time, so I just enjoyed being with her. There was only one time in that 3 weeks where I tried to sit her down and talk to her, like seriously, because I didn't want to put any pressure on my child. I wanted her mother to give me the information I needed. But like this one time I sat down, held her hands, looked into her eyes, and just said, you can talk to me, trust me. And she just froze up. Her mother walked in behind, and my daughter wouldn't say anything to me. So like now I know more. She was told not to disclose, I believe, and she became fearful when I asked her that question. And plus, her mother walked in. But at the time, it was just like, this is weird. Like, this is my daughter and I communicate about things. She's my biggest teacher in the world. I love her perspective on life. Where did she go? What happened? Um, but I thought that, all right, now that trip's over. We're back at our home in The Hague, far enough away from Poland, and I'm not going to let this fool me. Like, I'm stronger now. I've seen this too many times. So I just kept saying, no, let's go get help. And until it was too late. And what she told me happened 2 days after Christmas. I spent 2 days in 2010. I spent all day outside with my daughter playing in the snow. My wife actually told me that she wanted me to spend that time with my daughter. When I asked her why she wouldn't come out and play with us, she said, I want you to spend this time with her. And then around dinner time, she started calling me frantically and texting me and saying she needed her to come back. When I got home, she was ready at the top of the stairs, dressed for the first time in those 3 weeks, and tried to convince me that she was going to take our daughter to the store for art supplies. And I just said, no, like that's ridiculous. You have her passport. We'll go together, but you're not leaving with our daughter with her passport after what I've been hearing. So my daughter and I sat down and started watching her favorite movie. I made popcorn and tea, and I just remember like looking in my daughter's big blue eyes and just thinking, this is not gonna get me. And my wife was storming around, just saying, "What, can't you support me? I want to take her to the store. What's the problem?" And I'm just like, "No, we'll go together in a little while, but calm down, and you and I need to talk." So then another guy knocked on our door, and this was a guy who was extremely shady. Um, and he convinced me that his daughter was down the street at the library, and his daughter and my daughter were friends. So I said, yes, go to the library, see your friend. And I was completely I lost it. I lost the hold I had on things. My wife had our daughter come up, and she wrapped her arms around me, and it was just a ridiculous hug. And I thought in my head, you're just going to the library. I'll see you and put you to bed. And like I told her I loved her, watched my daughter walk down the stairs. I watched my wife walk down the stairs behind her, and I never saw my daughter again.
And so, at what point did you know that there was something wrong? Was it like hours went by? Did you try calling? What happened first after that? Because I'm sure you thought in the short term that she was just at the library and you probably weren't really thinking of anything.
Yep, I did, and like my wife was able to just like make me think that she was my friend again. And like I'm looking at how beautiful she is and thinking, oh, maybe she's coming around. Have fun at the library. And then the guy that was there shortly after, he was like, "Oh, I got to go down the street and pick up a paycheck." Like he left me his pack of Marlboro Lights I was smoking at the time. He's like, "You'll need these more than me." I went in and called my friend, who I know from high school, called him and just said, like, what do I do? This is happening again. I don't know what to do. And like as I'm telling him this is like 10 or 15 minutes after they leave. He said, "Well, what's it like? Is it like, what's your favorite color?" And then she answers refrigerator. I remember that. And then it just clicked. And I knew they were gone. Just kind of brainstorming with my friend, what do I do? And then I just like it snapped and they're gone. I told them I had to go. And I just ran around the house real quick to look for signs that would prove that, they're probably gone. Like if my daughter's blanket's gone and her stuffed animal, they're not just going to the library, things like that. So I did that, within 20 seconds or 30 seconds probably. And then I sprinted to where the guy told me he was going to get a paycheck because I was blocked down the street. And I was just following the trail. Though the people he was supposed to pick up the paycheck from, so they hadn't seen him in months. So then from there, I sprinted 2 or 3 blocks to the library. The library was closed and hadn't been opened, and the police station was around the corner. So I went to the police station, pounded on the door, absolutely frantic. The police station was locked because it's a Dutch police station and they have hours. And so I just kept pounding on the door. Like at that point, no, I didn't care if I broke the door. Like, you're going to open the door. Guy came, opened the door. I went in the back and I was just like, they're going to Poland. They're being abused in Poland. I need you to stop the bus from going to Poland. And they wouldn't take a report, and it just went from there. Like, they sent me home. Yeah, they wouldn't even take a report.
Why? What did they
I
say?
don't know. I can only guess that they were that they were primed, that somebody's told them that they had to get away from me or something, because they wouldn't give me any information. But I knew that my first wife said that it's going to be pointed back at me. My dad's created a red herring. You're going to be the bad guy. So I knew that. So I went there and I'm just like, I put my hands out. Arrest me if you want to. Because they're not telling me what even the allegations might be against me, but I know they're gone. They're going back to a terrible place, and it's like I know the seriousness of it. So I'm just like, I'm her dad. Stop the bus and evaluate her now, and you can figure out the rest of those details later. But they sent me home and wouldn't do anything. I went back to the Dutch police 2 or 3 more times, and it was the same thing. They wouldn't. I never even got a formal report filed in the Dutch police department. I immediately got on the phone with the U.S. Embassy because my daughter was born in Connecticut. But their stance is it's out of our jurisdiction. The local police have to take care of it. One of the duty officers told me on the phone that, it's not good if they get back to Poland. What you should do is reabduct your daughter from your first wife if they're still in the country. If you see her again, reabduct your daughter and get her to the embassy or the consulate. And you can, if you're running, you can yell and say you're here with a U.S. citizen child, and we'll let you in and we'll guarantee that she'll be evaluated. But until she's here, we can't do anything. And that's what the U.S. Embassy told me. And I remember the moment when he said that. I'm looking out my window and just thinking, oh my goodness, this is like a movie. This is absolutely crazy. And just taking what he said seriously, like, it is that serious. I know it is. And if I have to get my daughter away from my wife, what does that look like? Do I have to push her to the ground and steal her phone and run through a city that I don't even know? But I printed out directions and put them in my pocket in case it ever happened. But I believed what my first wife had been telling me, that they're going back to Poland. And so I just kept saying, stop them from leaving this country. And the embassy couldn't do anything. The Dutch police weren't doing anything. And my first wife got in touch with my parents and convinced them that it was a marital spat and she was getting away from me. So like that changed everything when that happened. Then I didn't have a chance.
What was the like time span on this? Like how from that moment that you just talked about to where it escalated to your parents, being sort of turned against you two when she left, how much time was between that?
So the night of the abduction, I was in contact with my parents, and initially my mom was sending me the information for the embassy, and she was contacting the embassy and saying, call this guy now. He's waiting for your call. And so then I was alone in the Netherlands trying to figure all this out. And for the next, couple days, then New Year's came, and I was getting more desperate as time goes on, and nobody's acting like I think they should. When my daughter's being abducted, and I know this is happening, and like nobody's saying just stop the bus or whatever vehicle they're in. They're all just kind of like, yeah, what's going on? What are you talking about? And so I kept like seeing the picture more clearly, what my first wife had meant. And now it's actually happening, and I'm in the middle of it, seeing it happening, and I'm trying to communicate this to people, and they're not listening, or they say they don't have any power to do anything. And then I could tell that my parents were, they would say, oh yeah, we want to help you. But I could tell that it wasn't the kind of help that I needed, because all I needed was stop this child, evaluate her, let's get a lawyer as a family, do whatever it takes to do that. My dad flew over to the Netherlands, and like that evening had a psych eval team come up into my house. He let 5 of these emergency psych people into my house, and I'm sitting at my computer, and I'm absolutely disgusted, like, so because then I'm like kind of figuring out this is what my mom and my dad and everyone thinks that's the kind of help they think I need. And all I'm saying is stop them from leaving the country and do the evaluation. Like, how is that unreasonable? So I got the psych team to leave, because I'm just at my computer typing emails trying to get help. And I yelled at my dad and almost kicked him out, but I needed him and I wanted to trust him. So then we like went to the embassy together. I thought we were working towards getting an attorney, but we never did. He put me on a plane to go back to Connecticut and saying, we'll get an attorney when you get there. My mother and my aunt picked me up in Logan Airport and drove me straight to a hospital. It's a regular hospital. So we pull in the parking lot of the hospital, and the whole way I'm happy to be back in the United States. I'm thinking, all right, now I'm going to get some family help. And we pull into the parking lot, and my mom's crying, and my aunt says, let's go inside for your mom. So I think my mom needs some help because her granddaughter's just been abducted. I walk into the hospital, and they say, no, this is for you, Iain, you're staying here. So then I'm trapped in a hospital the moment I get back to the US. I talked to the psychiatrist, and he's ready to let me out the next morning. But then my mom, my dad, my cousin call and say, we're afraid he's going to hurt himself or whatever they said. And so they kept me for the full 2-week observation. It was a ridiculous thing where like they had nothing on me. I was under total control. All I'm saying is we need to get help. And like my emotional state is like crazy. Like I am desperate. Like the worst thing that could possibly be happening to me is happening. And I know that what we need to do is just stop it from going any further. So they let me out. And then I walked to my mom's house in the snow. She gave me my car keys and $20 and told me I had to go somewhere else. So like I went to a friend's widow's house and stayed with her and her daughter for the next 3 months and just kept writing to people, kept trying to convince my family that they had got it wrong. And I just needed their help with an attorney and, with them supporting me so that we could just get my daughter evaluated. Uh, I filed paperwork with the US Secretary of State under the Hague Treaty, which the Hague Treaty prevents a parent from leaving one country and going to another with a child. It says bring that child back to the country where they live and you go to court there. So I filed that paperwork, and this US Secretary of State told me it could take 2 years. And I was getting emails from them that said, we're really sorry and concerned about your daughter, but blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, well, sorry and concerned doesn't cut it, because it's now at this point, it was months were going by and nobody was on my side. I contacted people that wanted to help. I contacted a human trafficking organization in Cambodia that did eventually just get the local police in Poland to knock on the door, but there's no there's no international police force to step in, and the local police don't know what they're doing when it comes to this. So yeah, like I was just I was every day I'm getting up, going to my computer, trying to find someone to reach out to for help, typing emails everywhere I could, trying to convince my parents, with simple things. Like my daughter came back with a bruise. She came back screaming about her pee-pee. All I'm saying is let's get her evaluated and try to bring it back to the simple things rather than talking about mind control. Because you don't have to go to mind control to realize this should have been stopped and the child evaluated. But they wouldn't help me. So I decided I had to go to Poland. And
Oh my
that's
God.
what I did after in April 2011, I went to Poland.
And I want to talk about that in just a second too, because I think it's pretty badass that you did that, even though the effects and the like basically retaliation for you doing that was really messed up. Um, did you have anybody at that time that believed you, whether it was here in the United States or
I did. There were a couple of people like my friend that I made that phone call to. He's believed me the whole time. He's always said, I don't understand necessarily what you're talking about, Iain, but I know you, and I support you, and I'll help you with whatever I can help you with. He gave me his ear and his genuine best advice whenever he could. I called like a rape treatment center in Texas, and I remember talking to that woman. Her name was Diane, and she said, the system's not set up to help you, and I'm sorry about that. And just she told me to like take notes and write down the people along the way that and just it was like, sorry, I can't help you. I've got my own problems here in Texas, and good luck to you, but the system's not there for you. And that that's it. The psychologist who I was trying to get to reach out to my first wife, when I went to him like 3 days after I got back to this mess, he told me she can't leave the country with your daughter. That would be illegal. That just can't happen. And that's what he kept telling me. And I would tell him, but she's saying it's going to happen. And I know my wife, she's not lying. Like, I don't know what's going on, but I need help. And he wasn't concerned about it. And, like that's a shame because he had the signs to know that when a mother's threatening to, or a father is threatening to take a child to another country, you need to take that seriously because once it happens, it's really difficult to pick up those pieces. But no one else believed me. The people I was living with believed me. The widow of my friend. But people have their own things going on, and so nobody was looking at it as constantly and as deeply as I would. There was nothing else I could do. Like my family would like try to say, well, why don't you get a job? Why don't you like what are you doing? And it's like, are you not listening? My daughter was under my roof. My wife said she was being taken back to a cult. She had signs of abuse. That's what happened. Why aren't we just taking the simple steps as a family to do what you can in the system? Like I want to do what's possible in the system, and there are some things to do. But once my parents turned against me and I was by myself, and then even when I'm talking to the U.S. Secretary of State, I can tell that my mother's also talking to the U.S. Secretary of State, and so like everyone's perception of who I am is being affected by people like my first wife and my mother at the same time when I'm standing by myself. And I do look like I'm out of control because I just lost my daughter.
well, and you yourself even thought it was crazy whenever you heard it first. So it's like you can understand how when people are just like kind of hit with a narrative that's so different than what they thought was happening, it challenges people's belief systems so much that it's like there's no way like you were just talking about it this way and now you're saying it's
Mm-hmm.
this. That doesn't make any sense when it makes perfect sense if you actually go through the steps and like listen, but it's just like how we were saying, it's just beyond what people can comprehend that there can be things like this that exist in the world, and one of the guests that I interviewed, Chris O'Leary, he's a St. Louis Catholic Church survivor. He calls that the abuse of the abused. where
Hmm.
you're already abused and then you decide to come forth and you're basically abused again. You're gaslit, you're penalized, you're retaliated against, people don't
Hmm.
believe you, you suffer consequences, which you did, and we'll talk about that, and it's like you're re-traumatizing somebody who's already going through something so hard and like who had the courage to speak up, because like look at your father-in-law, like what a piece of trash he is for, being able to abuse people, and it's like that goes beyond the realm of comprehension for people. But there's parents like that like genuinely don't protect kids, and then there's parents like you who would do anything for them. And it's really sad that
Hmm.
like somebody wouldn't believe a helpless and um uh sort of urgent father who's like coming forth, panicking, saying this is happening. And it's like you had a history of being a good father. There was nothing to indicate that you weren't and that you didn't want to
Hmm.
keep your daughter safe. And it's just so sad how so many of these stories break families up in ways or fracture families or sort of create rifts between family members from somebody who grew up in a family that wasn't a cult,
Hmm.
because it can be so polarizing for what they're able to comprehend. So I'm really sorry that all that happened to you. I mean, that had to have been so horrible, like going through all of that and then just being, locked up in a psych ward right away and then sort of being gaslit with your family, and just having people not believe you. I can't even imagine like how difficult that must have been and like how messed up and traumatizing. And I think it's really brave, like I said, and it was probably sort of one of those like kind of last resort things where you're like, screw it, I guess my only choice is to go to Poland, like what else am I going to do? So let's talk about that.
When like when I realized that no one was like on my side and nobody was supporting me, I had a couple friends that would listen to me, but then I was just on my own. Like that was incredibly tough, and like I really tried to like kind of go back and teach my parents just the simple basics of, look, I was away for 3 months. The day I returned, I started reaching out to get help. Problems obviously in Poland, and just use like simple logic like that. But everyone was just taken away by this other. But once my first wife, had their ear, I didn't have a chance, and that goes back into like who she is, and that it was great when she was on my team, but oh my goodness, she's powerful, and these other people didn't have a chance once she got their ear, and it just kind of drove me. I mean, ultimately, it drove me towards God. That wasn't immediate, but but like there's only one who like claims to have the ability to answer prayers and wants to answer your prayer and hates wickedness, and so that's where it ultimately led me. But I wasn't willing at the time. This is still happening. I waited for 4 months trying to get help, and once I realized that no one in the whole world's going to help me, then I had a list of what could I do, and doing something was the like that was the only option. Then not waiting, or waiting and getting a job and going that route, or waiting the 2 years for the U.S. Secretary of State to step in. I couldn't even fathom that. It was just like once nobody's listening, okay, I'm going in, and then I didn't know the details of that. I just knew that I had to go in as a dad after coming to the realization that nobody in the world's going to help me. I'm going to go make them listen to me. And I didn't know what I would do. I didn't know whether I was going to take out one of her abusers. That was a possibility for me at the time, because morally and ethically, I was just like, well, if someone comes into my apartment and threatens my wife or daughter, I'll shoot them. So what's the difference if it's 4 months later? And who, like, if God's judging me, that's fine with me, because I honestly don't know what else to do or what else one would do or should do in this situation. And I don't care what the world thinks about me, because they're not listening anyways. But I flew to Amsterdam, rented a car on a prepaid credit card. So like I went to Walmart and got a prepaid credit card, and would just hoped they would give me a car with that, and they did. So I drove across Germany to Poland and still just I didn't know what I was going to do. I had maps where I thought maybe if I could get my daughter in the car, I could get her to the US Embassy in Berlin. I printed out MapQuest maps for that. And like I brought binoculars and a compass, thinking maybe if they're at my wife's grandfather's summer house, maybe I'd have to hide out in the woods. Like I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew that they were going to listen to me. Like I'm driving across Germany. I I stop at a gas station. I almost pick up a hitchhiker, but then I'm just like, no, this is serious business. I need to stay in my own zone. I keep driving, um, make it over into Poland. Then I stopped and I looked at the knives on the wall, and I'm like, all right, maybe I'll get a weapon. I looked at it, the blade didn't lock, and like next to that was a used hammer. So I bought the used hammer, and I still just didn't know what I was gonna do. Like I'm just going through the motions, and I kind of just hoped that it would figure itself out, and it ultimately did. But I decided that getting my daughter into a car and taking her to Berlin was out of the question. That was one of the most crazy things because it's about an hour drive through Poland to get to the German border. She was still only 4, so I would have had to take her from whatever adult had her, and I could not picture that happening. So I decided that I would wait for my father-in-law to come out of his apartment building because I knew that he did every morning to throw his beer cans away because he was an alcoholic and I could count on that. So I positioned my car so I could see the door, and I still didn't even know what I was doing. I was just sitting there just waiting, um and just like realizing how utterly crazy this situation was in, but just being at a place where what's crazier, what I'm doing or what they're doing? And I knew that what they're doing is worse and crazier, and I just figured that they would get to the bottom of it once they did a child abuse investigation. So my father-in-law came out with his cans. I turned on the car and drove towards him and around him and smashed the car to block his egress back into his apartment building. um, Got out of the car and reached behind me, just subconsciously didn't think about it, grabbed the hammer, like pump faked the hammer and chased him down the street. And then he fell, and I ended up just punching him with my right hand several times, and like taking his own hand that was holding his keys and making him hit himself. And then I just stopped, and it was like I had a peace that that was enough. And I wasn't angry. It was like I could see myself doing this in slow motion. Um, I stood there tied up with him. City guard came and I let them handcuff me, and I stood tall and just thought, now they're going to listen to me. And I felt like job well done. And it's not how it turned out. Like I spent the next 2 days in jail, and they brought me before a judge. And the judge, I asked for a new venue because of my father-in-law's friend was working in that same court. The judge wouldn't give me the new venue, didn't care why I was in Poland or why I did what I did. And then they started saying that I tried to kill him and that I hit him with a hammer, which I didn't. Um, and the medical reports from the court report show that I didn't. It's just him saying that I did, and the court just took everything that he said and that my first wife said, wrote that down as truth, and decided that they had enough to hold me on an attempted murder charge. They sent me to a Polish prison, and I didn't see a lawyer for 11 months. My parents turned their backs on me, and I later found like get well cards that they wrote to my father-in-law because I got to see the whole court record. And I just got totally slammed in Poland. Once I saw a lawyer at 11 months, it was a public defender. The U.S. Embassy just said I had to go with whatever the Polish system was saying. They wouldn't help me get an interpreter that would understand me. And I had no telephone privileges. Writing letters took months because it had to be translated to Polish. And I sat in Polish pretrial for 19 months before they decided what to do with me. It's 23-hour a day lockdown, 5 minutes of hot water per week.
Oh my God.
nobody spoke English, so I eventually learned Polish, but it's just like horrible conditions. You're always hungry. Like you're going from a one box with six guys in the room with you 23 hours a day, and it's solid. So there's no bars. You don't have any communication with anyone else. And then for that other hour, the guards bring you out to another walking cage. And so I just went from like thinking that now they're going to listen to me to like getting letters from the court saying another 3 months, another 3 months. And that went to 19 months. And like the judge told me that he had never heard of ritual abuse. Um, they had me do a psychiatric evaluation with court psychiatrists, and basically decided that me thinking my daughter had been abused was a delusion, and that's because there was no evidence of it and because no one else believed it. So that's where like there's no evidence, but there's been no evaluation. No one believes it, including my parents. I'm the only one that saw it. I'm the only one that's standing there and just saying, just evaluate my daughter. So it's because my side of the family and my first wife's side of the family said he's wrong, he's crazy. That's how I got labeled. And,
Oh my goodness, that's insane. And especially to be
mm,
treated like that much of a criminal when like you're the one whistleblowing as an outsider telling on criminals and all of a sudden now you're being treated like one. Is that common for these, I don't want to say trials, but sort of like these resolutions? Is that common that a person can be locked up for just insane amounts of time? Yeah.
so in Poland, they can lock you up in pretrial for 2 months, or sorry, 2 years, 24 months without any disposition. So, and like the guys that I was with, they were all pretrial and nobody knew when they're getting out. And it's just like this vague, we're going to keep you here while we investigate. And because we can't let you out on pro, let you out on bond because we think you might flee. And so I had no idea. Like I kept expecting the US Embassy to step in and help. I kept expecting my parents to step in and help. And I just wait for my mail every day. Then when I would go to court, they'd transport me with someone would have a shotgun and an Uzi, and I'd be in shackles. They'd transport me to court, and I'm like, finally, I get to talk to a wise judge, maybe. Of course, the judge was a joke, and he didn't believe in ritual abuse. It was as if, everything in the prosecutor's file, which was just my first wife and her father's testimony and my parents' testimony, was just fact. And so yeah, then once the psychiatrist decided that as well, but their job is only to look at the prosecutor's file and compare that to what I'm saying. They're not investigative doctors. They're just saying, all right, this says his child wasn't abused. He says she was abused, and he did this other crazy thing. So therefore, he's the bad guy. We got to protect everyone from him. And yeah, I got kicked out of court for trying to question my first wife. I would stay up all night preparing my trial, and like I went to graduate school for law, political science, and so I knew what I was doing. I knew how to cross-examine, and I knew I could just put a hole in her story at multiple different places because she was only talking on a script. But when I tried to do this, she immediately like started having a panic attack or appearing that way, went over to the window, and the judge banned me from future trials. And they wouldn't allow me to call witnesses on my behalf. I wanted to call witnesses from the Netherlands, including that psychologist who was seeing both of us. And they just did open and shut case with me. And then I was sent to one of the few maximum security prison psychiatric institutions in the country. And I spent, so I was locked up 50 months total. And I spent the first 19 in pretrial, regular prison, and then the rest in maximum, medium, and minimum prison psychiatrics, which are worse than prison for sure.
And that's for like the absolute like worst criminals. Of the worst criminals go to maximum security.
Yep.
I think like they're putting you, a father, trying to rescue a daughter. I mean, all these stories, they really, really make me question a lot. I look at things so much different. People in jail, of course, there's criminals in there. There are people that genuinely do bad things, but you see how some of these blackmail systems work and how easy it is to just twist somebody's arm to keep somebody in prison for a long time or to make this judgment call or this resolution on a court trial.
Mhm.
You see how they don't need evidence. They don't need proof. Like that system doesn't run on that. It runs on money and blackmail, just like these
Yep.
cult systems do. The court system is a cult. The jails are cults. How all of that is run. It's just like the cult system, and it's heinous that happened to you. And especially because, granted, this guy obviously walked away worse than you did from that fight. But at the same time, the fact that they just took his word and didn't even like look into your allegations is also really disappointing. You see that this system also doesn't look at both sides. If they have their mindset on something, like throw out everything else, it doesn't matter. Like you could have a
Mhm.
pile of evidence and they're already set before you even walk into that courtroom. And
Yeah.
so you're in prison for 50 months, all different levels. You're in different prisons. How are you coping? Is this something where you're getting a lot of time to like learn? Are you researching? Like, what are you doing with your time in there? And like, what are you going through during these 50 months?
So, I mean, there were different stages, and like just I think getting used to the idea that that prison is now your home is like a stage that takes a little while to get broken into. I remember someone at first saying, you might do 7 years. What do you think about that? That would be good. And I'm just like, that would be crazy. I expect them to come at any moment and open the door and put my daughter and I back together. But as time went on, I'm realizing like I'm in a trap, and these people don't care. They're all just doing their compartmentalized jobs along the way, and they're not getting paid to look under the rug. They don't care what's under the rug. They take the paperwork and then they do what they're told to do. Like when I got to maximum security, I again I got to talk to an educated person, educated people, psychiatrists, and I'm like, all right, finally, maybe these people will, not be just cogs in the machine. And the director of that facility said, they made a mistake. You shouldn't be here. But he's like, I don't know what happened. My job isn't to investigate. My job is to treat you how the court told me to treat you. And that's what I'm going to do. And he said, even though you don't have any signs of mental illness that I can tell, you're going to be here for at least 6 months, and I'm going to treat you with medication because that's how we do the treating, and that's what the court wants. So I went through that. The maximum security was absolutely a ridiculous place. And that's where I learned how to hide the medication so I didn't have to take it. And it was survival. It was survival. I went deeper into my Bible, and I learned more patience than I've ever learned. And I just kind of was like, all right, I'm going to work my way through this system. And this will pass, this will pass, and I'm going to just fight because that's what I have to do. And I stopped talking about my daughter once I realized that they were just treating me and passing me through the system, and that nobody would or could help me. And like I met some therapists along the way. One of them took me aside and said, she said, I told my husband that I know you're not sick, but I don't know what to do. And like, I can teach you Polish. That's what I can do. And, experiences like that were like life saving, just for someone to say, I see you. And, I don't know what I could possibly do, but as a person, I see you, and I'm going to, help you in whatever way I can, even though it's a little bit frustrating. And yeah, like it just got worse when I got to medium. Medium was worse than maximum. There was one guy who jumped over the barbed wire to get out and escape, and I'm sure they caught him. But like so many people were either contemplating suicide or escape, and I was even thinking, I was even thinking how I could escape and who could pick me up, because at that point I was on the eastern border of Poland, close to Belarus and Russia, and I just thought, I can't do this much longer. What do I do? And I had someone asking me to strangle him in the bathroom, like begging me to. The conditions were horrible. And that psychiatrist said, we're going to double your medication because they weren't treating you before. My response was, but that's because I didn't have any signs of mental illness. And she doubled down, made me, I had to learn how to not take the medication. And once I did get caught, and that nurse let me off the hook, but she could have either started giving me injections or sent me back to the higher security facility. So it was like a serious game that I was involved with it every day, and it was taking its toll on me until I got to minimum. And minimum was um, the problem with minimum is that you're still locked up and you're still waiting. But there were normal people there, like people that go in for depressive episodes, or for alcohol treatment. So there were normal people there. There were women there, and like I could have whatever visitors I wanted. I had my computer back with internet. So minimum was cake, but I had already been through hell by that point, and I know, and still only wanted my daughter evaluated.
And so, what led to you being let out after all these months? And let's talk about that part.
So that even at maximum, the psychiatrist said that he could, under Polish law, let me out, the next day, because his assessment was that I wasn't crazy. But that's not what the Polish court wants. He said you have to go through at least 6 months here, and that's when they want my opinion of you, and then I can give them an opinion. If they agree, then you're sent to medium, and then they can't let you out either. You got to wait at least 6 months in medium, and then be sent to minimum. Wait at least 6 months in minimum, and then so like it doesn't work that smoothly. So the 6 months turns into 8 or 9 months, or a year. Um, but that's how it happened. I just lived, waited for my opinions, and every time got bounced down. Um, and then once I was over a year in minimum, then they knew they had to let me out, because they don't have a reason to keep me anymore, and there's nowhere else to step down. But they made me set up like treatment in the US. They made my dad come over and pick me up, and I had to work with the embassy to get my passport renewed because that had expired. And it was a process, and it took several more months than it should have taken. But at some point, it's just like, if I say the same thing, if I say the right words over and over again, and they're writing it in their reports, legally they can't just decide, well, we're going to lock you up, because they have to have a reason to think you're a danger. And so I just knew what I was doing and how to play that game.
What happened after you got out? What were the first steps that you took after being, I guess, emancipated from this all this bullcrap that you had to wade through the last 50 months?
So my dad had come over because they didn't want to release me to myself. So I left with my dad, stayed in that Polish city for a couple nights at a hotel, and just like went to a club where someone I'd met in the minimum place. He had been there for depression, so I went to his club and just like hung out with him. He poured me a stiff drink, and I just, I was so shaken up, and just like finally I'm free, and like you wait for that day for years, and then finally it happens. But you're not ready to like relax. You don't know how to relax anymore. So it took me a couple months, and like my dad and I did a little traveling in Europe, and then I ended up back in Amsterdam at a friend's house, and I stayed in Amsterdam on a blow up match in his closet, and just like for bike rides, just tried to get myself back again, like learning that I don't have to go meet and talk to this person. I don't have to defend myself anymore. I can open the door when I want to, and just getting myself back. And then after a couple months, um, I couldn't work in Amsterdam anymore because because the only reason I had been able to is because my first wife. So I decided I'd go back to the US with my dad. He said he had a farm. And when I got back to the farm, he bought me a car. He showed me my room and then was just very supportive of, kind of taking care of me and nursing me in that situation. And I got back to research and just being able to think again and read books and get whatever books I wanted. And it just went from there.
That is one of the most difficult things that I hear from people who were either admitted to a psychiatric unit or, prison, is that when you're in there for so long, and you were in there exceptionally long, it's very difficult to reintegrate back into society, especially when the stuff that you're in there for to begin with, is still probably not going to be believed by people, and to think about your experiences and how people are going to look at you. It's really difficult, I think, especially whenever it touches on these topics. And so
Mhm.
what was your, I guess, what was the moment when you started thinking, maybe I should go public with this? Like, why did you take to doing that, and how soon after you got out of prison and back to the United States did you think, I need to find other people who went through this, or I'm going to start networking, I'm going to go online and start using my voice? What was your process from, being in all this trauma and being locked up to that, which is another really big step that you took?
So I pretty much knew I was going to go public the whole time. And like I had copious notes and journals that I had collected over the years in prison, and just like my whole suitcase is full of notebooks that were filled up. And I was like, conversations with the psychiatrists, I wrote them down and had a pad on my lap when I was talking to them because I knew that I would write it, but like I wasn't. I knew I had to put it aside when I was locked up because that made me look crazy if that's what I was working on. And so I just kind of said, all right, my first step is to get out, and after that, I am going to write. And I knew I was going to write. Um, but like when I started researching and writing right when I got home, then like I was new things started to pop up. Like I'm researching, and I had a realization that I had been focusing just on my daughter and my first wife, and please help, please help, please help. And I saw that this is a much bigger problem than that. And I had a feeling inside of me that I was supposed to not only focus on my first wife and daughter, not give up on them ever, but that maybe I'll have a bigger impact on and help other people that are also in this, because I couldn't see that before. Now I could see it. I started writing, and I had all kinds of files, and just I had been writing in my journals and all of that. And then I got this another feeling where like I didn't know what the story was going to be, and I thought that I was taking another step of like putting it on my shoulders. I'm going to write this and fix everything. So I took 95% of my prison journals, put them in the fireplace and burned them, and just kind of said like, all right, God, like I can't do this. If you want me to write a book, you're gonna have to show me how, because I can't even risk like me doing something because it's what I think is the right thing to do anymore. So I put it aside. I kept reading and researching, but I just waiting to know that I was going through the door I should go through. And I reached out and made contact with many people, like people like Lisa Meister. I got in contact with very early, and there were other people as well that supported me, believed me, and were kind of like, yeah, write the book. And and um and I was like, I am writing it, I just don't know what I'm doing exactly. And instead of going towards I have to finish the book, I went towards I have to run towards God like a man with his head on fire. And I went that way and just began fasting and praying and farming because I could fast and pray while I'm farming, and thinking I'm going to become a monk. And just like I knew with certainty that I would never meet another woman, and that this is the only thing I'm going to focus on. And I thought, and then Emily walked in my life and just shook that all up. So like there's been different stages. And she just like when you like being a monk, that's what I thought I was going to be. And I was just like, I have to eliminate all of that from my life. Um, I have to just focus on this. But when I was doing that, I was kind of also just going with my own intuition and not realizing that, like, no matter what it is, it's going to be something that I haven't thought of. And when she walked in my life, I'd had other women walk in my life, and I just wasn't interested. But when she did, I took her into the barn and told her my whole story, and like she was very taken aback, and I couldn't believe it at first. She didn't think the devil was real at first, and but like I just knew that, like I learned as time went on that she was supposed to be my partner in this, that she's taught me things about life and about love and about marriage, and just been supportive. And like when she heard my story, she stopped thinking about like what she had thought she wanted to do, and just like, what do we do about this? And that no one else in the whole journey had done that. And so, and it's just gone further. Now we're married, for this is our third year of being married. But like I bought her a Bible, and she went through the Bible on her own, and found the Lord, like, and I wasn't pushing it on her. I was just telling her about my journey and about SRA, and that alone, like, when you know and understand what the devil is doing, then there has to be somebody who is the antithesis of that, and it just happens to be Jesus Christ. Like, that's what it comes down to. And so she saw that with her own eyes, and we weren't a part of a church. I didn't think I would ever become a part of a church, because I wasn't happy with my childhood experiences, and I just thought they were all corrupt in some way. And we ended up at a church, because my stepfather died, and I did the eulogy and met one of the pastors, and then it just became clear that we were supposed to be there. And then at that point, we had a church, so we decided we should get married the way you're supposed to, and we did that.
I love that you found somebody to go on this journey with, and that could love you through it because you didn't really have a lot of that. You had sort of the opposite. You had a lot of opposition and people sort of turning their backs on you, even if it wasn't meant with malice, just ignorance. It's
Hmm.
very hurtful when you feel so isolated and alone going through something so hard. I love that she came into your life at such a crucial point. And like you said, instead of running away and being like, oh, that's way too much baggage for me, like, no thanks. She was like, okay, what do we do?
Hmm.
Let's put everything else aside. Like this has to be number one. I think that's so wonderful. And, for people listening, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but she's actually partners with you in public too. You guys have done podcasts and content, and I love that she's also like, hey, this might not be my thing, but like I'm going to use my voice with you. We're stronger together, which is really cool. It's amazing the impact that love can have on a journey
Hmm.
like this, and like I said, you're both really lucky that you have each other. It sounds like she's finding her purpose too through this. You're both divinely guided somehow to a mission that was bigger than yourselves, and how beautiful you both don't have to do it alone, you know? And so you
Yeah.
you took on to writing a book, and I want to talk about that because it just came out finally after all these years
Hmm.
of you figuring it out and researching and figuring out how to compile all of this information that you had that happened so quick, but also sort of so drawn out at the same time. So let's talk about the journey of you creating the book, and let's share about it, because I want everybody that's listening to go purchase it. It is really interesting how you constructed it with tangible photos and memories and things like that, in different ways. So let's talk about your book a little bit.
Yeah. So it was after Emily and I started working together that it just hit me. Like, I had a vision for what the book should be, and like, as you write the parts and put them together and stuff, that becomes even clearer. But I had a picture to work towards, and basically what I was going to do is just I wanted to tell the entire story in a way that is like, I think it's impossible to refute it. And so there's details in there that like weren't possible 30 years ago because we weren't sending emails back the way we are now. And like there's proof of things like me trying to get help 3 months or 3 weeks before the abduction and telling people that this is what she threatened me was going to happen, and things like that, and all of the communication of her telling me how much she loved me for those previous 3 months, that I just wanted to just lay it all out and tell the story, at the same time educate people, because I wanted to take it slow from child abuse to ritual abuse, because I decided that the book was going to be basically for anybody, pretty much for any adult. And so I had to like kind of gradually tell the story. I needed to be vulnerable, and like because the red herring is just pointing the finger at me and saying, "Hey, don't listen to what Iain's saying. Just look at Iain. He's the bad guy. Come on, guys, don't look over here." And that's basically all that's been doing in the book. I'm just like, all right, this is me. Like these are the worst things you could say about me. And like these are things that I wouldn't have revealed had I not been put in this situation. But I've been saying, and I mean it, that I'm not fighting for myself. I'm not trying to protect myself. Anything that's true about me, I don't have a problem with that becoming public. I don't have a problem with going under drugs or hypnosis and truth serum or having my brain dissected. Like this has never been about me. This is about my daughter. So here's what they say. Here's the truth. And no, let's get past that. And now let's focus on the fact that my daughter should have been evaluated when I said she was. And I mean, the other thing that I wanted to do with the book is glorify God, and I am certain that only He can make the change that I pray for. Only He can make that break, that stone that I've been swinging at. Only He can make it break, and I know that. I know that not only He can, but He says He will, and I believe that's what's happening. And like my story is extreme, and my situation is over the top for a lot of people to even conceive of. But if you just look at it, his daughter's taken, terrible situation, he's trying to get help. What do I do? Oh, it's God. I think that's the truth for every situation that people have, and that it's not as clear, because when it's not such a life and death situation every day, you kind of find good band-aids that kind of lead you away from God. And it's harder to find God in those situations. And that I'm blessed in the sense that every day it's like my blood is draining and I'm about to die, and I need the answer to that. I'm sure that that's what's happening. Like my book, I wrote it because the story was put on my lap, and I would be remiss not to tell the story. I want people to learn more about this, and this should be what our war is against. Like the other wars that have been fought during my lifetime don't stand in comparison to this one. And that's I just want to do the best that I can do every step of the way, and writing the book was part of it. And so I'm going to keep pressing forward, keep talking to people, keep telling the story, and believe that God is going to do the rest.
And thank you for taking all the time that you did to write this. It really is proof of the healing power of God, but also the power in our voices, like that we can take those things that eat us alive inside and that are burdens and things that shame us and things that people might not believe, and you can create something that somebody else can take and find a treasure in it. Somebody that you don't know, somebody that you might not ever know, can have their life changed just from hearing your story and your testimony and being like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. Somebody else understands. And especially with these topics, I was talking to, it might have been Samantha Baldwin. I know I reference her a lot, but she obviously has a couple books, has taken do the same thing of sort of documenting her experiences and getting it out to an audience that may not otherwise have heard of this topic. And it's very surprising in the book world how little these type of stories are published. And so there's stories about every other type of horror except these stories about what people like you, Samantha, other parents, survivors are coming forth and saying that they went through. And I think it's so neat that some of you are taking this route and filling a niche in an entire category of communication with other people, whether it's through fiction or nonfiction, and being able to document this information so somebody unlikely can get it in their hands and learn something, learn the truth of our world in some way, and that these things do happen. And I love that you did this, and I love that you called it I Love You Like One, a letter to my daughter, abducted by a cult. And people can purchase this on Amazon and they can also get it through your website, right?
Yes, they can get it through our website. I the PDF is available for download, Kindle, and I have a signed copy available through eBay currently. It's because I'm not selling directly from the website yet. But you can just contact me from the contact us button or I love you like one at gmail.com. And I would love to talk to anybody that wants to talk to me. And I talk to people frequently who have just had a child abducted, and like, what do I do? And it's such a crazy situation because the answer is you can't do that much, and the U.S. Embassy's not going to help you, and you're in for it. But I think you're not alone is the big thing, like that it comes down to, because when this happened to me, the only book that I found at the time was Transformation of America, Kathy O'Brien's book. And that's the only story of ritual abuse and mind control that I could find. And people weren't speaking about it like they are today. And now in the past 14 years that I've been going through this, just like the amount of stories that have been written and people that are talking about it, and people like you, Emma, that are doing podcasts, dedicated to this cause and to giving people a voice. I just think that it's kind of like dominoes falling, and it's being exposed, it's being revealed, and it takes a little while. And of course, we want it to happen way quicker than it is happening, but that's what we're a part of, and I believe that it's on its way to the end, like where it can't keep continuing. People are going to decide that this is not okay and see beyond the disinformation of it's the people that are doing it are still trying to convince everyone that it's not happening, but there's too many survivors speaking.
Exactly. And you're adding your voice now to that. I know you've had a lot of people who helped you, like Kathy O'Brien and others, that sort of helped you learn a lot more about these really foreign things that happen to children and in different sectors of society and in this world, and I love that now you can provide your puzzle piece that's going to go do a 360 and impact somebody else,
Mhm.
and that you can now give back to the same community, and provide that. And so your website is iloveyoulikeone.com. And what's really cool is there's a PDF. So for people who can't afford it, or maybe who don't have room for a book or whatever your reason is for not being able to get a book, you can get a PDF, the signed copy. There's the contact page. And is there anything else on this website that you want to talk about that could be beneficial for people?
I think that the related materials can be beneficial for people. There's one of the things that I've done in the past decade is grow my library, and I buy every book that I find on the topic of SRA, mind control, child abuse, any survivor testimony. So I try to list most of them there. There's also um, podcasts and people's websites that I found helpful. I haven't put everything on there, but the majority of the people that are talking about ritual abuse and mind control are listed on my website, and and I'm happy to answer any questions. Um, like if people are having trouble navigating or finding a resource, I do know of the book at least. I haven't read every single book that I have, but I've breezed through them and know what's going on in them at least. And I just think that people need to educate themselves and get involved in some way and start talking to people about this, because it's not rare. It's happening in our communities. It's human trafficking is not just in overseas with kids that we don't know. This is actually happening to us and to people like my own daughter. And it may not be happening to other people that are listening yet, but if you don't educate about it yourself, if you don't educate yourself about it, I I don't like to think about what the chances that it gets into your descendant tree at some point. It's just like, why is it okay for one person to suffer from this? And it's not one, it's many, and it's absolutely terrible.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And thank you for putting all this together. That's awesome that you have a resource page and people can click right on the topic that you want. If you want book versions to learn, if you want websites, podcasts, you can just click on the tab and it'll divert you down the page to where that section starts, which is awesome. And then you do have a YouTube page. I want to talk about that too, because I think books are one way to reach people. Doing podcasts on other people's shows is obviously a great way, and then also to have your own. So let's talk about your YouTube page.
So about a year before the book was done, I was getting antsy, and I just decided I'm going to make a YouTube page and make a couple short videos just because I want to kind of get started on talking about what the book's going to be about. And so I did that, and like I felt very uncomfortable. I had a friend help with one video, but like I just knew that I wanted to keep doing that and growing that. And so I've put the other interviews that I've had on there since releasing the book. And then I think in July probably, Emily and I were just like, all right, let's start making videos for our page and just talking about different topics that come up in the book that, maybe someone who hasn't read the whole book or who won't read the whole book will listen and get what's going on in this situation, or use it as an opportunity to answer questions that I know are coming up in the comments of different videos, and just kind of fill it in systematically based on like what I'm hearing and what I'm learning after reading my book. Even, I keep reading my book and keep trying to think of what I could do better, what I could explain better. And also, I think just continue, like talking about it all the time, talking about it, like not just the book's done, but the book's done and my daughter's still in the situation. Like, what are we going to do about it? Who wants to join this conversation? Who wants to learn more? And then there's been good response. I think it's a slow, hard process, and you know, but progress is being made. Getting Emily to come on and talk with me about these things, I think is great. She's my softer side, and and just very. She's become knowledgeable in her own right on this stuff, and is in the ministry of. She wants to help SRA survivors, and so I think the two of us together, with God on our side, um, that's the road we're taking. We were happy to do it.
So selfless, both of you. And thank you for putting all these videos together too. It's another great way to reach people and educate, and another way that people can support you, and might be good for people who maybe can't sit down and read a book. I love that you put part of your testimony on here and pieces of your story, symptoms and signs of abuse. I mean, there's education and testimony on here. So I love that, and love that you, like I said, you have a loving partner to help support you. Where else
I
on
do.
social media are you?
So I'm on Facebook and Instagram. I love you like one. And that's pretty much mostly Facebook I was using because I hadn't really used my Instagram account. And then, I decided I had to. So now I'm finding that Instagram is great for reels. There's one reel that has 240,000 views, the one with my first wife in the black dress there. And so, it gets people at least thinking about it for a moment. And then, you know, so I think it's a good platform. I'm trying to grow it. I've tried X out and I have eight followers on X. So I haven't figured out the trick of getting people to, I don't really know how X works yet, but mostly Facebook, Instagram. I try to like share other videos that you make or that Lisa Meister makes, or um, just get people to watch these different stories. It's not only my story. There's survivor testimony coming out every week, and I don't know. I don't personally know what else we should be doing or what else we should be interested in or how much Netflix we can justify watching when this is happening in the world.
I completely agree with you. It's definitely changed my life learning about all of this, and it redirects your focus, especially knowing that a lot of people that we watch on TV or in movies are either participants or victims of this system, and it's almost like
Mm-hmm.
heartbreaking to me now to like sit down, and it's not like entertaining anymore. It like breaks my heart or like disgusts me, and so I think there are better ways that we can sort of divert our attention, and learn, and go to these sort
Mm-hmm.
of alternative sources, people self-publishing books and selling them, small independent creators and artists, and supporting the community instead of sort of what we've been taught mainstream to do. And so I love
Mm-hmm.
that you created all that. And I'm going to have all of that in the show notes for everybody. But of
Thank
course,
you.
we can't tie up this episode without asking, where does this stand now? What are you looking for? Are there things that people can do to help your case? Where does this sort of stand today?
So today, right? So this is the 14th year since I gave my daughter a hug and watched her walk down the stairs. And every day has been absolutely excruciatingly painful as I just watch her childhood dwindle away. She's going to be 18 in January of 25. And I I'm just going to keep trying to do my best and try to get better at doing my best every day. Trying to hear the voice that tells me what to do, the one that's leading me in the direction that I've been going, and be a better husband and just do everything better every day. And that's all I've been trying to do. So I'm still writing to government organizations. I'm still writing to media here and there. I'm continuing to look out proactively for podcasts that will have me. And I'm often surprised that some of the bigger names just they don't care. They want to talk about whatever's happening in politics, and it's just like I don't get it, But so I don't know how this ends. But I do know like I do know that the victory is ours. That the captives are going to be set free, including my first wife and our daughter. That SRA is not going to go on forever, and I encourage people to care about the fact that this is happening in our world, and I encourage people to realize that what you know about evil matters, right? It really matters in how you look at your life and your purpose and what we're doing here. And if you just turn your back on evil, you're doing yourself a disservice. It feels like you're protecting yourself and kind of seeing the sunny side, but that evil side is encroaching every time you turn your back on it, and you're not going to be able to get away from it because it took my daughter, and that's what made me turn and say no more. And I know because I've seen it that it wants to take away everything that's good here, and we have to fight. We have to stand up and say no, not not my child and not that child either. And I think that's what it's about. Like I just want people to continue the conversation, do whatever they feel that they're called to do. I would love for people to read my book, even if they need it for free, and read other survivor stories, get involved and ask what they can do to help. And because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm figuring it out every day. And now I have my wonderful wife who says she's going to figure it out with me. And we just know that this has to end, and are kind of just waiting for other people to say the same thing. Like I understand that some people will never reach that conclusion, and that's fine. But I believe there's others out there that just need to like just see it, and then they'll also be like we were, and say, okay, let's get to fixing this problem. Um, so yeah, like I'm here to talk to. I'm here to help and do whatever my job is as I figure that out day by day. And I just think that's what we all need to do.
Remind people again of your email who want to get directly in contact with you.
So I love you like one, like the title of the book at gmail.com. And
Thank you.
there's a contact button on the website too. Or you can still message me through Facebook. I still do read my Facebook messages as well.
Multiple ways to contact you. That's great. And is there anything that you wanted to discuss or anything that we didn't mention that you want to talk about before wrapping up?
I don't think so. I think there was one psalm that I wanted to read,
Yeah, please
Psalm
do.
90, Psalm 94:23, and it says, and it's the King James version. It says, and he shall bring upon them their own iniquity and destroy them for their own wickedness. The Lord our God shall cut them off. And like that doesn't mean that we just sit back and say, oh, the Lord our God shall cut them off. That means that like in knowing that there is strength and there's hope and there's like this thing that gives me confidence that I know that it's going to be cut off. But I also am here and am aware of what's happening. And so I'm going to try to do my best in that scenario. And like from my perspective, I don't have a choice because my daughter is involved. But I just think that like knowing that good does overcome evil, knowing that this isn't just happening randomly, and that the it's being exposed, it's gonna be rooted out and dealt with. Like I encourage people not to be afraid of it, but to feel, you know, confident in that good is overcoming evil, and that is what we are witnessing. And I'm excited to be a voice and do whatever it is that I need to do.
Thank you for that. That was beautiful. And I love that we're ending sort of on a high note, and it's great to see you smiling and so hopeful. I know it's been you've literally been to hell on earth, and survived it. And we appreciate you continuing to go on each day. 14 years is a long time to fight, and you were fighting before that. So we thank you. Your daughter's so lucky that she has you, and it's going to be a beautiful day when we can have you on the podcast to talk about being reunited with her, because I know that that's going to
Mhm.
happen. I know that you do have a big place in this and that your story is going to help impact other parents and children who are going through the same thing. So you guys all have all Ian's information in the show notes. Please support him by buying his books. It's such a great way to support survivors, whistleblowers, advocates, is to just go directly to them, skip the third party nonprofits who, are owned by greedy CEOs, and go support small survivor businesses and projects. So I'm going to have his book. You guys can find it right on Amazon. When I typed his name in, I didn't see anything else come up. It was just him. So you guys shouldn't have trouble if you're just on the app, but you guys can go in the show notes and there's a link that will take you directly there. Go check out the resource page on his website. It's great whenever we can have information compiled in one spot. And thank you again, Ian, for doing that for us. And go share his website, grab another book, grab two whenever you buy them, give one to a friend, or send the PDF to somebody. That's another way that we can raise awareness, is through storytelling, and books can reach people differently sometimes than a podcast can. So I encourage you guys to please, if you guys have any ways or resources too that you guys can help, or if you know somebody that can, reach out to one of us and let us know. It would be great if we could, somehow elevate this to a point where it reaches the right person who says, hey, I can help somehow, So if any of you can do that, even if it's just your prayers, if there's anything that you guys can contribute, please do. We really, really appreciate it. And speaking of prayers, please pray over Emily and Iain also as they go through this. And as they traverse down this really hard path, and pray for his daughter and over his family. I do have so much hope that this will come to an end, and the more people that speak up, the more it encourages others too. So, you guys, thank you so much. We can't do this without you. We appreciate you guys hanging out and listening. God bless you all, and we will see you next time.